Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a really fascinating, honestly pretty explosive dialogue between author Karma Nayak and an AI named Vishvakarma. This exchange challenges literally everything you might think you know about systemic corruption and power dynamics. We're going to impartially break down the core arguments of this text, looking closely at what the author calls the digital Ugalan movement. It's a dense, highly provocative piece of literature, so let's just dive right in. Okay, here's a quick look at our agenda. We'll be mapping out 1. Helplessness or nature, 2. Modern Bosmasseurs, 3. The Epstein evidence, 4. Predator versus agrarian minds, 5. Nature's rule, and finally, 6. The movement's literature. Let's get moving. Section 1. Helplessness or inherent nature. So, this entire philosophical debate kicks off with a massive paradox. The dialogue aggressively pushes back against a very specific mainstream narrative. You know the one, the claim that top-tier elites, like high-ranking officials or judges, only engage in corruption out of sheer helplessness, like they're just afraid of losing their lucrative posts. Well, the author completely rejects this premise. He argues that excusing the exploitation by folks riding around in multi-million-dollar cars while the rest of the country is literally starving is an absolutely unacceptable defense. To call their corruption a compulsion is, as the text boldly states, the pinnacle of intellectual bankruptcy and mental ignorance. The author views it as a completely false narrative designed solely to protect the powerful. Moving on to Section 2, the modern Bosmasseurs. To totally dismantle that helplessness excuse, Nayak brings in a really powerful mythological metaphor: educated Bosmasseurs. Now, if you know the myth, Bosmasaur was a demon who gained the power to turn anyone to ashes just by touching their head, and he horribly misused it. The text argues that exactly like British colonizers who used their advanced education to enslave and loot, modern educated elites are continuing that exact same colonial legacy today. They're using their degrees as weapons for exploitation instead of protection. And to back this up, the dialogue points to a really staggering statistic: 88.5%. That is the percentage of seats in the high judiciary controlled by a specific dominant group. The author uses this data point to argue that this level of dominance is all about inherent systemic control and a deep-seated desire to rule. It is definitely not some tragic compulsion or helplessness. All right, Section 3. Global evidence, the Epstein files. Now, you might be thinking, is this just a localized issue? Well, the text actually expands its scope globally. There's this super common assumption that having a top-tier degree naturally breeds an ethical, moral leader, right? If you believe that, the author brings in a shocking international counterexample to completely shatter that idea. He points straight to the Epstein files. The dialogue highlights how this massive scandal involved the Western world's top scientists, presidents, and judges. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein himself was a highly educated teacher. Nayak argues this is undeniable proof that supreme global status and elite education, when combined with immense power, do not equal morality. Instead, it exposes an absolute barbarism driven by what he calls a tribal, predatory nature, completely void of any helplessness. Which brings us to Section 4, Predator versus Agrarian Mindsets. So if the root cause of this exploitation isn't a lack of education, and isn't systemic helplessness, what is it? Nayak posits a stark cultural contrast between two fundamental ways of living. On one side, you have historically dominant groups operating on a parasitic, predator or tribal model, basically focused on war and looting. On the flip side, you have indigenous roots grounded in a cooperative agrarian model, living in total harmony with nature and community. And this introduces a really crucial concept in the text Satyabuddhigyan, which translates to true wisdom. The author argues that true humanity naturally develops through that grounded agricultural lifestyle. The dialogue claims that the predator groups entirely lack this Satyabuddhigyan because they've never lived that connected life. And that is exactly why, according to the author, a simple, uneducated farmer can possess far more fundamental humanity than a highly educated, corrupt supreme judge. I love how this metaphor perfectly sums it up. Expecting a lion to become a vegetarian by feeding it grass is foolishness. It captures the author's complete rejection of the idea that systemic exploiters can be reformed. A predator's nature is simply to consume. It's a hard rejection of the hope that the current system is just going to magically fix itself from the inside out. Section 5. Nature's Law, the Digital Ugalan. Okay, so what happens to a global system that completely refuses to self-correct? Well, according to the text, nature has a universal law of balance. The author brings in the dinosaur metaphor. Just like the dinosaurs went extinct because their massive size became highly imbalanced with the Earth's ecosystems, this exploitative lion culture is ultimately going to be wiped out by a natural purge. And that brings us to the crucial point. This digital algalon is presented as nature's mechanism for this modern cleansing. Algalon means a great tumult or revolution. The text frames this as a 21st century digital and ideological war, an updated Devasor Sangram, basically a battle between gods and demons. It's a digital war of truth aimed squarely at awakening the youth to dismantle the descendants of those colonial and Epstein-esque mindsets. Finally, Section 6, Digital Ogulin Literature and Support. Now, a revolution of the mind obviously requires literature, right? So let's look at how the author translates this intense ideological awakening into actionable resources. To directly fuel this movement, Nayak has made a veritable fortress of knowledge available. There are 18 revolutionary books. And to make sure this is absolutely accessible for every student and truth seeker, the pricing is incredible. Hindi editions are just 10 rupees and the English editions are 90 rupees. You can find all of this directly at their official store, hitrianagopur.stores.instamojo.com. But the digital revolution definitely doesn't stop with the books. You can follow the ongoing Ugulan on their dedicated YouTube channel at the handle @Karmanayak Furthermore, if you want to directly support the author's mission to keep the pen moving and the ideological battle alive, you can use PayPal at hirannungpur@gmail.com or send UPI support to hirannungpur@Kotak. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the exact question the text forces its readers to confront. In this updated battle of ideologies between the narrative of systemic helplessness and the awakening of your own Satya Buddhi Gyan, whose narrative are you truly empowering? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the digital Ogulon. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.